About a year or two ago, I was lucky enough to experience one of Hans Zimmer's live concerts in Munich. I actually still have the tickets right there, the orange one, but in the very brilliant performance, he played a myriad of works from his discography, including his music for Denis Villeneuve's Dune. There have been technically 3 releases or 3 albums since the first film came out. There was the original motion picture soundtrack, and before that he actually released the Dune sketchbook, which is that might be my favorite of the albums. It's a lot better than the score, only because he's really allowed to flesh out the different songs or the tracks in that album rather than being confined to his screen time on the film. But then lastly, there was the Art and Soul of Dune, which is a more ambient companion to the book of the same name, about the planets behind the scenes of the 2021 film. So, with the second part of this series to be released very soon, I thought it would be interesting to give my analysis of this music that won Best Original Score for the Oscars last year, right after I saw Zimmer and his bandmates perform it. I do think his team of musicians deserves a very decent shout out. It's really a wide range of talent. It's not all him, but it is still under his vision and has his unique fingerprint on it. But he really couldn't have done it without vocalist Loar Kotler and woodwind savant Pedro Eustache, as well as beloved electric cellist Tino Guo. But I will go through the different themes and leitmotifs throughout the score and maybe give my take on it, how it relates to the story. So the first thing we hear in the film, after of course the Sardaukar is saying dreams are messages from the deep, which is a pretty interesting filmmaking decision. That quote's actually not in the book, but it's good. It's a good quote. We hear this percussion beat. Of course, the piano would not be the best at replicating such a sound. He did create new instruments for the score, but I will do my best to explain how it sounds to you. This specific percussion beat is probably one of the most iconic sounds from the score. You would most likely recognize it if you heard it, but sounds something like this. I don't know. Just listen to the tracks. It appears in Dream of Arrakis, the first song on the score, as well as Paul's Dream, maybe the most popular single from the Dune sketchbook. I think this clearly relates to the planet Arrakis. When we first hear it in the movie, it's playing over Chani's opening narration, right? But in the other places that we hear it, I think it's really supposed to signal danger. It acts as a warning to the imminent peril that one would face on this planet. Frank Herbert did title the book Dune because of how similar the word sounded to the word doom. The Atreides, they were really doomed from the start as soon as they accepted Arrakis as their new fiefdom from the Emperor. This next leitmotif more clearly represents Arrakis, however. It appears in tracks like Leaving Caladan, when the family is leaving Caladan to go to the planet, and in Ripples in the Sand, when they see a sandworm on Arrakis for the first time, as well as in My Road Leads into the Desert, when Paul chooses to stay on Dune. So, this is probably the most recognizable musical sound from the movie. If there is a Dune main theme, this would probably be it. But I think the score is a bit more complex than that. All of the themes really play off of each other, and they're connected in some way. It's more nuanced. But here you go. Sounds like this. If you've seen the film, that should probably ring some bells. So, from a music theory perspective, we start on this D, that's our root, our pedal tone for this melody, and the song begins to form a kind of implied major seven chord. So, yeah, this D to that C sharp is a major seventh interval. But as soon as we hear notes like that, and when we go to the next chord, which is E flat major 7, we can discern that the scale is something like this. I think that would be best described as a Phrygian sharp 3, sharp 7. This is what a normal Phrygian sounds like. It's the third degree of a natural major scale. In this case would be B natural major. But yeah, we have a sharp 3 there and sharp 7, so that is not natural. And then starting on this major 7, it's peaceful in the beginning, but then we hear E flat major 7, which is literally every note 1/2 step up, going up the note right next to it. So as soon as you hear that, it's, you know, startling, and it kind of invokes your fight or flight sense, because, you know, that's not right exactly, but it still sounds really cool. It's amazing. But and then after it does that once, instead of going back up to E flat major 7, goes to D and then C. That's what the bass is now. And that goes outside of that scale for a bit. C is in the natural Phrygian mode, but because it's the natural 7, technically a minor 7th, it's not the sharp 7, so maybe you could say the scale is like that, but I think it's easier to just say it's switching between two, one with C sharp as the 7, and then another with C natural. But the melody still stays the same, so with this E flat major 7 over C, it becomes C minor 9. If you're already pretty familiar with music theory, I probably don't have to explain much of this to you, and if you aren't, then a lot of this is probably not getting to you that well, so I'll move on to our next leitmotif, which is Paul's leitmotif. So it this also appears in Paul's dream, as well as the Gom Jabbar scene and the track The One, but it's pretty freaky. It's not what you would expect from what one typically writes for their protagonist, because Paul is not a typical protagonist. Frank Herbert wrote the story to kind of show the fallibility of heroes and these messiah figures who many are saying Paul is. As soon as you hear Zimmer's music for Paul, it sort of starts to settle in that maybe he's not exactly someone you'd want to follow or someone that you would hope to be. But he's still, of course, an empathetic character. He's the eyes that you see most of the story through. But I'll play it for you so you can start to get an idea of what I'm talking about. It's sung with a female voice, so again, piano won't really do it justice. But there is a significance to that I will explain later. So we start with that's a D minor kind of going to this A sharp. This is a diminished chord, D diminished. Again, he's in D. That's really his like go-to scale, and I can't judge him. It works. And how the bass progresses is pretty similar to the Arrakis leitmotif. Probably on purpose. The planet and Paul are pretty connected, you could say. And both themes appear in Paul's dream, because Paul's dream is of Arrakis. Back to the music. So this F to F sharp, A sharp, then A, is, well, very dissonant, obviously. So not only is the A sharp in this a tritone with the D with the root, or flat 5 technically, with the F natural, A sharp to A is a minor third and then a major third. And you don't typically put both thirds together in a scale. It's not right. But you do see this with the Arrakis leitmotif as well. If you want discordance in your music, this is, the book that you want to take a page out of. I'll move on, though, to Paul's house, his family, House Atreides. So this piece of music is really the only one that is completely diegetic. That is, it appears in the film and the characters can hear it. It exists within the universe that the story takes place. It's when they land on the planet and this dude comes out and does this epic bagpipe solo, and then all the other ones join in. Unfortunately, this was not actually recorded with a bagpipe. It was an electric guitar and a few other woodwinds, some by Pedro Eustache, as I mentioned. But yeah, it's really cool. I think I would call this like the House Atreides anthem, national anthem, or maybe the fanfare. Here you go. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know why all countries don't just ask Hans Zimmer to write their national anthem for them, but we're in C this time, not D, C major, and the melody is really just going up the major scale, but then when we hear that B natural, we know that we are in C natural major. So pretty simple so far. We have this major 7. But then the next note we hear is that B flat, which is not in the natural major scale. It's in C mixolydian. That makes like a C dominant 7th chord, not major 7. The mixolydian mode is the 5th scale degree. So in this case, we'd be in F major or F Ionian, and that's kind of the next chord we hear. It's a C pedal tone from the start, and that in some tracks it just continues like that for the whole time. But it's kind of implied that with this we're going from C dominant to F major, and that's a 5-to-1 cadence, which is the most consonant chord progression that there is. So yeah, it's pretty powerful and epic. And does that again, but with a different response, kind of still ending on the C instead of the B flat. But then the really cool part goes now there we go to A flat major. That's also not in C major or C mixolydian. It's in C aeolian or C minor, and so is B flat. That's the flat 6 and the flat 7 respectively. But then it resolves into C major instead of C minor, even though we were in that key. But it makes sense, most of the song is in C major, so if it were to resolve to the C that's actually in the scale, it'd sound like that, which does still sound pretty Hans Zimmer-y. Maybe more towards his Pirates of the Caribbean era, but yeah, that's a really cool piece. You should definitely check out the track House Atreides on the Dune sketchbook. It's this, but it's like 15 minutes long, and so it's that the whole time. It's really cool. This next one, it relates to the house, but not specifically. The tracks that it appears in, like Moon over Caladan or simply Caladan, lead me to think that it probably represents Caladan. And it's a really beautiful leitmotif. It's probably one of my favorite. It does play over the Atreides family, probably to represent their nostalgia for the planet while they're on Arrakis. I think nostalgia is a really great descriptor of how this makes you feel, but I'll play it for you. It goes like this. So yeah, we're in D again. This time closer to D mixolydian because we have a D dominant 7th chord. But so we do have the 5-to-1 cadence. I think this specific one is called the perfect cadence because it goes from the normal 5 chord to the minor one instead of just major. If it was major diatonic natural, it would sound like. So, you know, that's more what you would get with the House Atreides anthem, but not the Caladan leitmotif. It goes to the minor. Actually, it goes D in the bass D, C, starting to build tension with C and the F sharp making a tritone right there. Then to B flat, which is the 3rd of G minor. This minor chord over 3, it's less resolved, so it leaves you wanting more, but the song does remedy this by going D major over F sharp, the 3 of D, and then to the root of G minor. And that's really resolving because this F sharp is the 7, so it's literally going a minor second up to half step up to the root. And then this is pretty interesting. It goes from the G minor root to D minor over F, the 3rd. Even though we just had D major, so pretty contrasting. And D is the natural 5 of G minor, and G aeolian. D is what you would hear in a diatonic version, but it then goes from D minor to C minor over E flat, the 3rd. He really likes that chord. It's, like I said, it's not yet resolved, but it feels like it should be. It's, at least in the case of that cadence, it's, yeah, like that should be resolved, but it's not, and it makes you feel like depressed, and it's what I might call the grief chord. But going past that, goes into A diminished over C, the 3rd, to D major. the F sharp on top and the D on the bottom. That sounds the best, or that's how it's really played in the film. But yeah, again, probably my most favorite. Moving from House Atreides to House Harkonnen, we have another percussion beat. This one is pretty simple, I guess, much like the Harkonnens themselves, but not the Baron. He might be a malignant glutton, but he is a tactical genius. But the percussion beat we hear fairly often, it's on the first track, Dreams of Arrakis, over the narration, because it is the Harkonnens that currently occupied the fiefdom of Arrakis. And again in Armada, when they attack the city of Arrakeen, and Burning Palms. So, sounds like this. And sometimes it's paired with this kind of bugle fanfare. It's a tritone, right? The king of dissonance. Another significant use of the percussion beat is in the scene where the hunter seeker comes into Paul's room to try and assassinate him. We hear signaling to us that the hunter seeker was sent by Harkonnens and is being controlled by a Harkonnen. And that's a really great use of leitmotif in a story to communicate something to the audience that maybe can't be communicated explicitly through dialogue, at least in that moment. Going back to the Burning Palms track, we do hear that along with the bugle, but it's coupled with this next leitmotif that I was pretty ambivalent to as to the meaning, but I'll play it for you. If you've listened to the score at all, it might sound familiar, but I thought it was probably the Harkonnens at first, because it's, with the Harkonnen beat, but it does play somewhere else. Maybe if you stretched it, you could say it represents the conspirators to the Atreides, the plot made against them to, get rid of the house, and the Emperor gets all the money. But that's the thing. I think it's much more closer to the Emperor and the Imperium than it is to the Harkonnens, even though it plays over the scene where, Raban's like chopping off the soldiers' heads. One thing that really convinces me of this is that it plays during the track Holy War, which is when Paul and his mother Jessica are in the tent and he's starting to have visions of the future, a future where he is leading these Fremen Fedaykin soldiers into battle, committing genocide in his father's name. Because, and this might be spoilers, but he becomes the Emperor and the new leader of the Imperium, so that's really what makes me think this theme is connected to the title of the Emperor. In the case of when it's played in the present during the first film, when the events are happening, it's probably more representative of the current Emperor Shaddam IV, who will be played by Christopher Walken in the next film. But yeah, I guess we'll see in part 2 how much we hear that again, and it might be easier to determine because the Emperor does not appear at all in the first film. However, there is one of the first scenes, we hear that same leitmotif again in the track Herald of the Change, when the Herald of the Change is speaking for the Emperor to give Atreides the fiefdom. So, yeah, again, this is a really dissonant scale. I don't even know what to call this one. It's got both threes in there and then tritone and the fifth. I guess it's really not necessary. I can move on to our last leitmotif that we'll cover today, which is the Bene Gesserit leitmotif. And I've said that word a lot. If you're not too familiar, it's probably what you know as a theme. It represents a character. It's a musical idea, and sometimes it plays when the character or idea or place is on screen, or mentioned in the dialogue, something like that. It dates to like Wagner and opera days. So this leitmotif for the Bene Gesserit is made, unsurprisingly, with a bunch of female voices because, they're a sisterhood. And there's a pretty interesting correlation that I've noticed. I'll play it for you first and then see if you can hear what I'm talking about. So it sounds something like this. I may have misheard some of it. It was more difficult to discern what notes he was playing, but we start out with this D diminished chord and go to A minor over C, the third. Again, he really likes that chord. And I don't blame him. It's a very great musical decision. So one of the melodies is really going in between these two notes, the A flat and A natural, as the bass goes from D to C to B flat, making this chord either or both B flat major 7 and B flat dominant, and then ending on a sort of sus4, I think, which you would expect to resolve to this A major, but I don't think it does. I think it just goes back to D. Also, the bottom part is kind of playing the lament bass, which is a really, famous musical thing. Sounds like it's in a whole bunch of songs, but yeah. The thing I wanted to point out is at the beginning, the very first part of the song. I'll play it for you and see if you can guess what I'm talking about. Well, let me do it one more time. It's very similar to some music for another character. Maybe it's easier if I don't go down, just keep it on the D. It's Paul's theme, right? Now, there are a bunch of thematic implications that you could take from that. Maybe I could see it as it maybe showing how the Bene Gesserit are really in control of the whole Imperium, including Paul, because they've been manipulating like bloodlines and places of power for centuries or for millennia, and Paul's being is basically determined by all of these conscious decisions made by like Reverend Mothers to create what they call the Kwisatz Haderach, which comes from a Hebrew word meaning shortening of the way, and it's kind of like a messiah figure. The Kwisatz Haderach is supposed to be able to see into both feminine and masculine past, as to most, in contrast to most Bene Gesserit, who can only see through feminine past. But yeah, some are starting in the film to think that Paul might be this messiah, and if you listen to this possible correlation, it's, well, even then, I'm not really sure what to take from that, because you could say that it's Paul who's in control of the Bene Gesserit. They're starting to fear Paul and his power, because they weren't expecting him, like Jessica was supposed to have a female child, because, you know, they can control what sex their child is when they're born. But it could go either way. I just thought it was a really interesting discovery. There is so much more that I could have covered here. I did notice a few other leitmotifs that didn't exactly appear in the original or official score, like leitmotifs for characters such as Duncan Idaho and Liet Kynes, and that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. Nevertheless, this has to be some of the greatest and most experimental music that I've ever listened to. But despite how otherworldly and foreign these artificial and synthesized instruments and sounds are, it still very clearly contains Hans Zimmer's unique style that's been present across all of the hundreds of scores that he's made over the years, if you listen closely enough, or if you're really familiar with his work. But let me know if you have any thoughts or analyses of this piece of art. I would really love to hear them.